Well, good morning and welcome. This is Tampa Home Talk, and we've got a great show lined up for you today. Mr. Dave Greene in the house. How are you?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me.
He's with Woods Trial Law, just in case you don't remember him or you didn't hear him the last time he was on.
It's always exciting to have a lawyer on the show.
He specializes in all things defects, HOA. You're good at that stuff.
That's right. So a lot of the people of Florida homeowners are usually who I'm representing. I've been doing this work for about 10 years now. I've kind of worked with everybody on all sides of this, but happy to serve the homeowners of Florida these days. And unfortunately, I only talk to people who have problems.
That's how no one ever talks to an attorney unless you're friends with a lot of them, like me and Leo. Nobody ever talks to you guys unless there's a problem. That's how it goes.
I only see people when they're having a tough time. I wish I do get to talk to some people, ahead of time. It's nice if I can talk to contractors, builders, things like that, give them some advice, help them figure out. Here's some way to protect yourselves and, how to balance out the business. It's important. We need to have a good relationship between everybody.
So before we jump into the real estate numbers, give the person listening just a little background on yourself and Woods Trial Law. You're a partner over there. And tell them about your background. What kind of law stuff do you do over there?
Yeah, so I've been doing, like I said, construction defect work for about 10 years. I've got a background in criminal defense work and personal injury defense work.
Oh, that ties in nicely to construction defects. I'm just playing with you.
There's sometimes an overlap on some of the less savory contractors. Sometimes they've got a little bit of a background and a history. But typically...
Boy, wouldn't that be true, I would imagine.
Yeah, listen, it's a tight labor pool out there. We need people.
Mm-hmm. You were just talking about that this morning.
Yeah. So I work with my partner, Kevin Woods, over at Woods Trial Law. He is a personal injury attorney. I run the construction defect side of the house, and we do everything from single-family homes, condominiums, townhouse claims, HOAs, condo association claims, and I've defended, builders, developers, subcontractors. But these days we're usually bringing claims against those entities for, bad construction defect, things like that.
And you guys are a litigation firm too, right? You're prepared to take it all the way to trial.
Yes, actually, my partner Kevin is a very seasoned trial attorney. He's a board-certified civil trial attorney. And I've been in trials as well. I've had probably about 15 or 20 trials in my history. And we are the ones who are kind of prepared. So we work these cases up, and every case that we take is a case that's going to go to trial in our minds. And because we work things up that way, those are usually the cases that settle. The ones that you don't pay attention to and the ones that don't get enough time and energy, those are the ones that always become problems in the end. So we take a pretty aggressive stance. We are kind of the proverbial train on the train tracks coming down.
Yeah.
And we're coming for that trial. And if you want to get out of the way, make the clients a reasonable offer.
Most of the time in litigation, doesn't it make sense just to come to an agreement? Because I feel like in litigation, nobody ever wins, or at least not the way you're hoping to. No one's ever really 100% happy with the outcome.
Yeah, listen, if you're talking at the micro level, which is, the single claim kind of a field, it makes sense. Listen, the homeowners have been wrong, and there's clearly something wrong, otherwise they wouldn't be coming to me. I don't take cases, that are just hey, this texture on this wall isn't quite the way I want it to be.
Well, let's face it, litigation's a lot of work. It's too much work for that.
It is. Some people want to pay on principle. If you've got a retired multimillionaire client and they've been wronged by someone and they feel that they want to litigate this on principle, fine. They'll pay the bills. They'll end up paying tens of thousands of dollars and, get the victory, the feeling of victory after that. Maybe it's worth it to them.
I've been involved in several of those. I'm just like, this case should settle. This case should settle. It's not settling. This case should settle. Why isn't it settling? There's a $200,000 offer on the table. Why isn't this case settling? And it goes to trial.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the end like of that? Like just kind of, so what do you think when you're thinking, okay, it should settle, and then it doesn't? Are you around for the end, like the final verdict, to see if they should have settled?
I
know he is.
He is, because he's the lawyer. Unfortunately, with me, I just go in
and out,
do my thing at trial, do my dog and pony show, 24 by 36 points with lasers, talk about things juries can't understand, hopefully put them to sleep by the time cross-examining comes up, so when I'm being crossed and my argument's being undermined, no one's awake. But I never stick around for the end of the trial.
So what do you think? Like when it's something like that, and maybe you're even encouraging your client, hey, this is a pretty good offer. You probably should consider taking it. And they're like, no, I'm going all the way to the end. How do you think that usually shakes out?
Well, I've got a practice now where I put that stuff in writing before them. And if it is a good offer, I'm going to have them sign something saying, hey, I think this is a good offer. My lawyers told me it's a good offer, and I still want to go to trial anyways. Because if they go to trial and they lose, 100% of the time it comes back to, hey, lawyer, how come you didn't tell me that this could happen?
It's always your fault.
It's always all our fault.
Always.
Most of these cases do settle outside of court. I mean, sometimes we'll get to the courthouse steps. I mean, sometimes we will gear it up. But those are usually unique single-family home cases or much larger multifamily home cases.
And they realize, okay, they're going. I probably should settle.
My favorite one, I had one 2 months ago, Newport Richie, trial appearance. Did my 6 hours of prep the day before, got in my car the morning of, drove to the courthouse, got through security, and then the attorneys were coming out and telling me to go home.
That's how it is.
That's how it settled.
Yeah, sometimes they just want to push it all the way. And, sometimes the people who are paying the money just want to see how far you're willing to go. And unfortunately, by the time we get there, it's very expensive because we spent tens of thousands of dollars in the weeks leading up to say, hey, these numbers are just going up.
You have to be ready for trial.
Right. We're going to spend that money because we're assuming you're not going to come across the table and cover this big gap that we have here. But, the builders have been hit, with some fairly large judgments. There was a case up in Jacksonville called Heron's Landing many years ago, and that was like a $10 million judgment against the builder. And everybody freaked out about that. And all the defendants said, hey, don't push this stuff to trial because we're going to get hit with these big judgments, and we don't want that.
Well, put them out of business.
Right. Puts them out of business. Attorney general complaints have happened. There's been hundreds of millions of dollars of different, funds set up to remediate some of this bad construction. So the builders know that it's out there. They know that they've got some exposure to this stuff, but they've come into a very business-friendly environment in the legislature in the last couple of years, and so now they're making hay while the sun is shining.
Well, we're going to talk about Senate Bill 360, and before we do, let's just jump into the numbers for the week. So we'll talk about how they stack up over last week. But, we were talking about the market being tight before the show, right, Dave, and before Leo got here. So one of the things we look at as real estate agents, and this tells us without even looking at anything on the market, how the market is, right? So the number of new listings is coming in at 721. Now, these numbers we look at are measuring only single-family homes in 3 counties. So Hillsborough, Pasco, Pinellas.
Hernando.
Well, no, these are only, remember, in the Florida Realtor ones
Hernando.
include Hernando, but our numbers do not.
Okay.
Because Hernando doesn't play in the same sandbox as the rest of the other counties. So that's why.
They don't have a sandbox. They have a farm.
Yes, they do. It's a different sandbox called Flex. But anyway, 721 new single-family homes on the market in the last 7 days. 780 of those have sold. So we're selling more than we're putting on the market.
We have a dip, though. If you look at historically, we were up at 1,000 sold per week back in May, and then we were in the 900s. So, that is a dip on sold.
That's because there's nothing left to sell, right? So we were talking about these little houses going up like chia seed, pets, whatever those things were back in the day, and that will certainly create some defects. Pending is coming in 930. Some of those may cancel after they get done with inspections. I still
get confused that every week for like 4 years we've been tracking this. Every week more homes have gone under contract than have come on the market. Every week.
Buyers are pickier now than they have been in a long time. They're very squirrely. They cancel for little things. Everyone's still using the FAR bar as is contract, and so they can cancel because they thought the walls were a different color than they were. They have the ability to do that. And if they don't find what they want, I feel like buyers are still, they might go under contract, but they're going to be looking. Something better comes up, they're just going to cancel and go. We're seeing a lot of that in this market now. So sellers, if you're on the market, you've got to be priced correctly. Now more than ever, it's the most important thing. And
that's why we see price decreases. This week was almost 700. The week before it was 600. We've been around the 600. So we're getting a spike in the decreased prices.
Yeah.
We're seeing a steady, strong, very, very strong market. The Fed's increasing rates to curb spending is not happening here in Tampa.
Yeah, well, sellers think the market's the same as it was a year ago, and it just isn't. So buyers are picky. They're doing their homework. They're doing their due diligence. They're not going to buy whatever with all your defects. So get a pre-listing home inspection is my real estate tip of the week, especially if you've been in your home for 10 years or more. 813-377-2775. 813-377-2775. If you're looking for a pre-listing home inspection, Beryl can hook you up. If you want a value for your home, we can do that too. 813-377-2775. Just text value. We'll get back to you with the valuation. Stick around. We'll be right back with Dave Greene.
And Katrina, you wanted me to talk about builders risk?
Yes, I think that is a perfect insurance tip of the week if you talk about builder's risk, because that's the insurance you have to have if you are building a home or renovating a home or can't get a regular policy for whatever reason.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a couple different products that we have for those situations. So for one that we have is really designed for more for like your cash buyer that's doing a fix and flip, short-term policies. You can do it as short as 1 month.
Wow.
Or you can do it, for 12 months. And those package together with liability. So those are pretty nice little policies for the fix and flip. Now, one thing to note on that, the reason why I say it's really designed for cash buyers, is because they are only covering that building on an actual cash value basis, right? So that's going to be the depreciated value for the building and whatever building materials that you have. So, obviously the new stuff you're doing on the reno will probably be, replacement cost if it's brand new, but everything else is going to be depreciated. So it doesn't really work with any sort of, traditional type loan. And then we have another product that's a true kind of builder's risk, where it's designed for those major renovations and for the ground up, type build.
Which is a 1-year policy?
Yeah, those are typically going to be 9 months to 15 months, but we can even have one that we can do up to 18 months, because let's face it, most builds these days are going to be, if it's super custom, it's going to be more than a year, probably, unless you really, really got all your ducks in a row from a contract standpoint.
And after COVID, you saw some of those going even longer, didn't you?
I have one that I've renewed every 6 months for the past 3.5 years. Yeah, I mean it's 8,000 square feet, so it's taking forever. But yeah, so I mean we've had those too. So now the one for that true builder's risk is it doesn't include liability. So that's something where you probably want to get a separate policy, just because you're the owner of that property, you get hurt, make sure that you're DYA.
How much would a separate liability insurance policy cost, roughly? What do you think that would be for a year?
It really depends on what you're looking for, but they're not bad. Probably $500 or so. It's really not bad at all. Because you're not the GC or anything. You're just, owner of the land. So if something happens, from a construction standpoint, those people are going to have workers' comp that covers first, that kind of stuff. So that's not really something that you would need to be concerned with. So it's not, the prices aren't terrible.
Makes sense.
What if I hire a handyman and he gets injured at my house and doesn't have workers' comp?
If you hire a handyman that gets injured at your house and they don't have workers' comp, that's a good question. I mean, you have liability insurance built into your homeowner policy. So if you did have any, if you were at fault for that injury, that's where that would come from.
But what if you don't have the regular insurance policy and you only have the builder's risk policy?
And what if I'm not at fault? The guy just didn't have insurance.
Well, if you had a builder's risk policy, if it doesn't have liability, then, that would be, you wouldn't have any coverage. But if you had the liability policy and you had some sort of, and you had some degree of fault, you have coverage for that. But if it's just, that guy might just be, SOL, if he's, it depends. That would be a good question for an attorney. Typically, they're going to sue everybody. So it's best to have liability insurance that way, even if, you're not at fault, you have somebody defending.
Well, I guess that's a perfect segue to our attorney in the studio this week to talk about Senate Bill 360. So have a good one, Adam. Thanks for tuning in.
I know I've been talking a lot about Senate Bill 154 lately, but this one's 360. So I guess as an attorney, because attorneys write these laws, did they really, 360 bills were discussed during this? Or how did they number these things?
I'm not privy to their numbering system, so there's a lot that gets thrown at the wall and doesn't make it through, various committees. So there's lots of bills introduced that just kind of die, at the first stage, at the filter. I mean, for a bill to actually get through, the process, we've got a lot of committee meetings, we've got judicial review committees, there's executive action analysis committees, they go to rules committees and back, and they get changed, and we have multiple bills. So we have a bill in the Senate, we have a bill in the House. So Senate Bill 360 was also House Bill 85.
And how do they reconcile those? Because I know from following one personally, it was eventually the Senate on Senate Bill 154, which is the reserve study one, the Senate said, okay, House, this stuff you did is complete conflict. We're cramming this one down your throat to approve it, and they did. So, how did they solve the conflict? Because you have the same bill introduced in both places. Both places do all their edits. How does that reconcile?
Yeah, so that's where the committees come in. So if there has to be an agreement and matching language between the bills of both houses before they will go up to the governor to get signed into law. So if there is a disparity, that means it gets kicked back to a committee and they have to see if they can change it. But yeah, you have to have the mirror image of both bills on both sides before they'll get admitted in. You can't have two competing bills, leaving the Congress to go to the executive.
And then I guess my follow-up question for that, since we're now in high school government.
Going back to civics.
Yeah,
Listen, most people are not going to remember any of this, so I'm sure they appreciate the rundown.
We need a little bit of the rundown. So let's just say we pass a bill in Florida, but on the federal level, it's not in line with, let's say, Constitution or federal law. So what happens if a bill passes in Florida and then the government, federal, looks at it and says, no, you can't do that? Is that something that could potentially happen?
Yeah, I was going to say, next time I'll bring Schoolhouse Rocks. We can put that up in the background. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, federal law is the overall law and will supersede Florida law. If there's a conflict, federal law will win.
It's supposed to, but don't they sometimes say, yes, states get to run their own way?
Yes, so we have the 14th Amendment, which is federal powers not reserved to the federal government. The rest of the powers become state powers. So things like driving an automobile and licensing requirements, those are not federal laws. Those are reserved to the states. And they can say, Florida, you set your own guidelines and regulations for this. And just has to match under the umbrella of federal law, saying, hey, it can't be discriminatory. You can't have, unjust practices and this sort of thing.
So how did they...
So this is a good question for you, too. So as it relates to the whole state-federal thing, can you really pass a construction law federally? Because isn't the requirements to build properties in different places and the way you do it completely different?
Well, I mean, Florida has the second strongest or strictest building code in the United States, followed California obviously has the top. So each building code is going to be slightly different, but you have something called the 10 States Code. And it's called the 10 States Code because the 10 states in the Midwest all use the same building code. So there's certain states where it would be applicable to have more of a joint kind of law over that. But I mean, something like Florida that's got its own special building code, and organizations like the Tile Roofing Institute or the International Association of Certified Home Inspectors that have Florida-specific guides because our rules are so different, that's where Florida needs to stand on its own. Now, if, for instance, we took someone that was like governor of Florida, made him president of the United States, he can make America Florida again.
This will be interesting. That's probably enough of the political thing for the show. Let's get back to Senate Bill 360. So talking about this did pass, right? And this is specifically related to construction defects,
yeah. So
which include...
I was going to say, we're jumping right back into the political side, unfortunately. So...
Oh, my goodness.
You can't have a lawyer to talk about a Senate bill.
We're talking about legislation here. And unfortunately, the homeowners of Florida have gotten quite a 1-2 punch on this legislation. So this is a construction defect bill, which makes it a little bit harder for homeowners to bring claims against builders and developers and trades. And so they're kind of doing a death by 1,000 cuts strategy of just kind of pushing wherever they can.
So this bill doesn't necessarily help homeowners. It may hinder them a little more. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. There's really nothing in here for homeowners to be happy about. So the background of this legislation was this has been coming for a couple of years now. This kind of first made its appearance several years ago. We have a couple different timelines in Florida. So if we're talking overall timeline to bring in action, you build a house, you buy a house, you discover a problem, what can you do about it? There's a 4-year statute of limitations saying, hey, you found out something, you got to bring it within 4 years. If you're going to bring any claim at all, it used to be within 15 years of the house being constructed, basically. They shortened it to 10. Now we're down to 7.
Ooh, so everything got tighter.
So everything is getting tighter. And we're getting squeezed on the front side, we're getting squeezed on the back side.
Leo, to wrap up on that, do you think that's ample time to discover defects on a new construction home?
Honestly, yes. I mean, the defects will manifest within the first 3 to 5 years. If it's roofing, it's going to be within the first 1 to 2. So I'm not overly scared on the 7 years unless you have someone who owns the home that sells the home to someone else that knew about the problems and sold the home to get rid of it because of the problems.
And then the warranty would not transfer?
The warranty may transfer depending on the language, but then if it's past those 7 years, you wouldn't be able to file a claim against the original construction people. It would have to be against that seller.
This is where it gets dicey. 813-377-2775.
Welcome home. Leo Kane here with Bill Engineering and Inspection, bringing you all construction defect all the time, talking about Senate Bill 360 in this non-political episode of Tampa Home Talk.
Oh, I love how you're going here. I'm just saying.
Well, I guess I'm not going to ask this next question because that is too political, so I'm going to jump down to the question under that.
Okay, you do it.
So we've talked a lot about construction defect, and I personally divide it into 3 categories. Like, does it meet Florida Building Code? Was it built per manufacturer installation instructions? Was it built to industry standards? But what exactly, as a lawyer, would you say a construction defect would be under these new rules?
That's a good question. And what are some of the stuff you're seeing? Like,
okay,
the people that you're defending, like, what does it look like?
Gotcha. So most of the claims, I'll answer them in reverse order. Most of the claims that we're seeing are building envelope questions. So is water staying on the outside of the house where it's supposed to be, or is it migrating inside? That's always kind of a big threshold question. If you had a roof put on and there's water coming through your ceiling, it's a short hop to figure out, what happened there.
Like 1-year-old house and there's water in the ceiling on a new roof should definitely be a construction defect.
You'd be surprised. Some people let this go for a couple of years, and you shouldn't do that. You got to act on this stuff a little bit quicker these days. So most of what we're seeing here is bad stucco, bad roofs, poor drainage and grading, water coming in through, any penetration, through that shell where it can. Poor window installations, overall poor quality. I mean, a lot of the houses that I'm seeing kind of coming through the pandemic years, especially those early 2020, 2021 homes, you could just tell this thing was put together with subprime labor. We'll
with
call
Elmer's
it that.
glue.
Hopes and prayers, and that's it. As far as what is a construction defect, so this new law has actually changed what you're able to bring a claim for. So in the past, before this bill, and maybe we can just go over the broad strokes of this bill, but we'll start there with that material violation change. So the material violation is something that's new to this bill, and it basically came from the vestige of this legislation that said, hey, if you've been injured, if there is a building code violation in your house, you can bring a claim, full stop. Some builders felt like that was a little bit too broad, and so they wanted to constrain the ability of people to bring a claim. So now they changed it to say you can only bring a claim for a material code violation versus a technical
And what's
violation.
the difference in those two words?
So a material code violation is a violation that may reasonably result or has resulted in physical harm to a person or significant damage to the performance of a building or its systems. And that's verbatim out of the law. So
That's so
basically,
lawyerly and
it's a
hard
very
to break
lawyerly.
down.
That's
It
so
is.
easy for an engineer who's also a mold assessor to penetrate that.
Yeah.
right. And because, I mean, when you start looking into this, I mean, can a small problem in a building untreated become a very large systemic problem in the building? And that's kind of where Leah would come in and say, hey, you may have a small problem here. There's a little bit of water coming in through this area, but left untreated. I mean, Leah, what happens when there's mold inside of a environment that, is feeding that mold?
I mean, when we get at these tight houses with the ACs that are not undersized, they're just perfectly sized for a really tight home. Once you get moisture in there, the AC is not running, that turns into mold. You get asthma problems. Your house doesn't breathe properly. You end up telling people they need to leave their bathroom fans running 24 hours a day. Yeah, I mean, this can get really dicey really quick on these new homes.
And so that's one of the big changes of this new law is that now it's just these bigger claims, these material violation claims. They don't want you bringing something to say, hey, the staple you used on this is 1/8 of an inch too small.
So let me ask you a relative question that I think ties into this, right? And we haven't seen it in a minute, but back to exactly what you started this topic with, right? Thinking about the Chinese drywall in 06, right? That was a construction material defect, and you said in 2000, right? Some labor, or 2020, some labor shortage things. So what if there's something like that where the products that get imported from wherever, because there's supply chain issues, or something like Chinese drywall that we have not rediscovered yet?
Right.
Is that count under this?
So it would count. I mean, if there was a substandard or non-approved material used in construction, that's going to be a defect. And the question is going to come back to the builder, say, hey, did the builder know about this? Were they providing cheap materials knowing that they could just get more profit on the back end? And interestingly, the Chinese drywall is still going on. There's still multi-district federal litigation going on about those.
Which is crazy, isn't it? No one has any responsibility in it.
Right. You're trying. Go ahead.
And it's not just Chinese drywall. That's they say Chinese drywall, but I mean it was Taiwanese. It was also American. U.S. sheetrock had a couple of runs that also had the bad sulfur content.
Right, and these things are decades old now, or more than a decade old, and people are still fighting over them. And it's tough because you want to hold a foreign corporation accountable who's probably out of business and their assets are all gone. And
that's like it's a communist country. It's kind of hard to do that, isn't it?
Since they're still in litigation, I would say yes. They've been having a very hard time recovering for that. And this bill itself, like I was saying before, they really do have that 1-2 punch. They've shortened the time frame on the front side to say, hey, we're going to calculate the time you have to file a claim from these earlier dates rather than these later dates. So
what do you mean by that?
So there's certain triggering events that start the clock on these things, and it's like actual possession of the building and issuance of a certificate of occupancy. There's certain trigger events that say, hey, we're going to start the clock if one of these things happen.
Okay.
And it used to be the later of all those dates, and now it's the earlier of any of those dates.
Which could make a big difference.
Right, so that's shortening the window for a claim to be filed.
So, for instance, if you have a subdivision that's built over the course of 3 years, and it's like a townhome subdivision, they're going to trigger it based on the earliest certificate of occupancy. So if you have a subdivision that takes 4 or 5 years to build, that last house only has, 2 years on this clock?
So that was an interesting fight on this. The builders wanted a per unit statute of repose, which means that whenever that individual townhome unit is constructed, that starts the clock on that regardless of whatever else happens. This bill retreated a little bit from that and said, hey, it's basically a per building probably time frame. But that was always what we were pushing on the homeowner side, is that, hey, you should look at this community as a whole, and until the community as a whole was done, that's what should start the clock.
Mm-hmm. We were talking before the show about just the general economy and just who knows what this is going to look like in 6 months or a year or whatever from now. I keep thinking about, because I lived through the crash, right? The peak of 06, the drop of 08, and then that slow recovery back up. And there were entire neighborhoods where builders went out of business, they set, and then several years later, maybe some builders or individual people would come in and finish these.
Right.
So how does something like that play a part if we see that in the future? How is that going to fall under this new Senate bill?
Well, you should always be doing inspections on the properties that you're going to buy. So that would be where you would come in if somebody was taking over a project. You want to make sure you have a very good report done about the status of those buildings, and if there are any defects, you bring that stuff in as soon as possible. Because once you start taking over that project and you start doing your own work, that's always going to be the response to say, hey, our work wasn't like this when we left. You guys must have done something, changed something here. Of course, if they're out of business, good luck chasing those people down. They're probably just a dry well at that point.
Hence, your inspections probably matter more than ever.
They do. And, I mean, luckily the insurance policies survive their bankruptcies, and so you could still go after their insurance companies who were on the project, but then it becomes a different issue. You're fighting over insurance policies, exclusions, who had time on what risk, and that becomes pretty complicated.
That must take you guys weeks into months to discover all that, to prepare for litigation.
We were working with experts like Leo nonstop. I mean, he's kind of the eyes and ears on the ground, really getting us the good data about what's going on here. And then we have to, read through these policies and talk to homeowners and go to builders and figure out, is there a real fight about this? Do we have kind of everybody on the same side? I mean, sometimes when there's clearly a defect, we don't have too much of the fighting. It's just who's responsible for this money. Or is insurance company A 50% responsible because they were on this when it's happened and somebody else took over? So a lot of times, we're just kind of working behind the scenes to figure out who's going to pay what portion of this. Because, again, if it's a townhome defect claim, we could be talking repairs in the millions or tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
These are big issues that take a lot of money. And if we don't recover for the association or for the homeowners, they're getting whacked with special assessments, and they're going to be paying a bunch of money out of their own pockets.
I mean, to piggy on that one, we had a case in a subdivision where one insurance company was on the roof and another insurance company was for what happened within the building. So even though they ceded and said, hey, we know the roof was installed incorrectly, this other insurance company would only kick in if we could prove that inside that unit had damage. So we had to inspect 150 units with thermal cameras to show how insulation was bunched, and that insulation was bunched from moisture intrusion, and that's what we needed to do to trigger the insurance company to be able to pay.
And if you hadn't noticed, the insurance market in Florida is a little shaky this past year or so.
It's like the Wild West right now.
And that's where this stuff is coming from. These insurance companies are saying, hey, we're paying out way too much money. We can't keep a business going. We're all going insolvent. I don't know how many companies went out of business last year. I think it was like a dozen insurance companies.
Easily.
Stopped writing policies, went insolvent. Now Citizens is the chief insurer. Yeah. And even then, people are seeing rate heights of, thousands of dollars a year.
Up to 40% they were allowed to hike rates. I mean, that's...
And they're still asking for more now.
And they're not even the cheapest on the block. They're usually the most expensive for the least amount of coverage. And then now they can hike it by 40%.
And now now there's the flood insurance requirement that everybody's paying into that fund now as well. And at the same time, they're trying to limit how much they're paying out, on these claims by the legislation that they're putting in. So they're spending money on lobbyists to cut down on claims that they may have to pay, at the same time asking for all the premiums in the world, and at the same time still crying poor to say, hey, we can't even keep a business afloat.
I mean, I've said this so many times on this show, but I think, if you look back to the time that the housing market crashed, right? And it created this global recession. At that time, it was sinkholes. That was the big thing, right? If you had a crack, people were hiring attorneys and experts to say you had a sinkhole, or, they would just litigate that. And so it literally cost the insurance companies tens of millions of dollars, to the point to where now we have legislation where you don't even have any sinkhole coverage. You literally, your house has to fall in and the government has to say it's not safe to live there to have coverage against a sinkhole. So I think the same is true for these roofs, right? That was the modern day version of that. People were going in and saying, oh, you're going to get a free roof on a roof that was 15 years old or more. Like some of these roofs were 20 years old. These people are making claims. Some of them left the state, they were sellers, and it's just, I have a lot of issues with that, but I feel like it's going to come full circle to the same thing, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, the insurance companies are shooting themselves in the foot because they're saying we won't insure any houses unless they have everything pristine. And the way that everything was pristine is that homeowners were filing claims to get these houses in ship shape before they sold them. And so that's kind of just feeding this loop cycle of bad insurance.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should just require a new 4-point every year when they renew you, and that would certainly document things on the property, wouldn't it, Leo?
Well, there's problems with that. We can talk about that when we come back from the break, because there was an insurance company doing yearly inspections, and then when all their court cases popped up, those same reports were being used against the insurance company.
Oh, well, yeah. Let's talk about that when we come back.
Yeah.
Our offer number is 813-377-2775. This is Tampa Home Talk. We'll be right back.
Welcome home. This is Leo Kane with Barrel Engineering and Inspection. Normally at this point in time, I would talk about some listings, but you don't have any listings.
The ones we have are still getting ready. It's taking a little longer than normal. We'll have some new ones next week.
So has Barrel Engineering and Inspection's sponsorship of your open houses by announcing them on the air gotten rid of your inventory?
We sold a lot of them. We have one on Evergreen that's $500,000 with a pool. Nice little property.
Where Evergreen?
1364 South Evergreen.
What city?
Surprised I remembered that, in Clearwater.
In Clearwater. You have a $500,000 home in Clearwater with a pool?
With a pool.
With a pool?
Yeah.
How close is it to the water?
10 minutes from the beach.
10 minutes from the beach. By foot or by car?
Just, driving distance.
Golf cart?
Yeah.
Golf cart.
You can't say walking distance or foot. It's not
So-
politically correct anymore.
So golf cart. So the promoting Barrel Engineering and Inspection,
Oh my
promoting
gosh.
these on the air has helped sell your real estate.
Leah's not involved in any of the real estate selling. I'm just going to tell you. Keep him in the inspection lane. But if we need some help,
I am great at announcing listings.
Yes, you're great
And
at
if
that.
you have a house out there that you'd like to sell,
We can do it.
and you'd like a Keller Williams open house
Yeah,
announced by the Barrel Engineering and Inspection open house segment on the air,
Bear won't be involved other than talking about the open house and getting a home inspection pre-listing. If you've been there for at least 10 years.
argue with results. Because of this, you have no listings.
He takes all the credit.
813-377-2775. 813-377-2775. If you have a home that you want a Keller Williams open house at with a Barrel Engineering and Inspection announcement, text the word open to 813-377-2775.
I love how he's sponsoring the announcement. I'm like, are you coming to the open house, Leo? You
No, I
bringing
never
like
got-
snacks and goodies?
Why come to the open house when I can let 50 to 60,000 listeners out there know about it? Like you said, on Evergreen, house with a pool, Clearwater, 500,000. That is a steal. The median house price in Tampa is 400. So for slightly above median, you're 10 minutes from the ocean.
Yeah. Cost you $100,000 up in a pool.
It'll cost you more than that to put in a pool. Yes, you've got a pool, and
At
you can
least
get a
that.
golf cart. Can you get a golf cart thrown in on this?
I don't have a golf cart, but we have a connection, I'm sure, for a golf cart.
We will even hook you up with a connection to sell you a golf cart.
Listen, our offer number is 813-377-2775. We'll give you some real advice. I don't show up like this. I'm just saying. Leo.
Let's bring David
Leo.
Greene back into this.
Oh, please break up this craziness.
Oh,
will
yes.
you, Mr. David?
Give us some lawyer speak.
Well, I was going to say, Leo's going to be my first call next time I'm looking for a house. I'm going to call him up first thing, have him come in, give it the soup to nuts inspection. He does great work. I'll
Listen,
vouch for that.
here's the thing, and I'll give you a quick little tip, and we'll wrap up on this Senate bill. If you're in your house and you have somebody like Leo's team at Barrel come in and do a pre-listing home inspection, you get the beauty. It's your home, right? So if it's something simple and you feel like, okay, I can fix this, maybe you shouldn't. That's a different debate for a different day. But you get the opportunity to fix whatever is in that inspection report how you see fit, right? If you're under contract with a buyer, A, they're squirrely, so they might cancel, right? B, they're going to probably dictate and say, okay, this whatever, even though it's simple, needs to be done by a licensed contractor, something as simple as like the knockouts, right? The electric panel, that little plastic part, anyone could probably do that.
25-cent part from Home Depot.
But if you're under contract, you're going to now have a licensed electrician come put that little plastic part in your electrical panel.
Right, and if something's discovered during that inspection that wasn't disclosed, is that grounds for breaking the contract?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
definitely.
So buyers can cancel for any reason whatsoever within that inspection time.
I mean, that's why it pays to have your ducks in a row so that you can lock that contract in. Everybody wants certainty. So that's why having somebody like Leo come by and kind of give you the honest assessment of your property is well worth the time and the money.
Well, there's stuff you can't see, right? Because you're not on your roof regularly. You're not in your attic regularly. You don't have your head underneath your kitchen pipes regularly. So you guys are looking for all those things that homeowners, quite frankly, are busy and probably don't notice.
And we might be able to discover some construction defects during that inspection.
Maybe. Could be.
And then if those defects are found, you're going to have a hard time going at it alone. So that's why the professionals at Woods Trial Law are there to support the homeowners of Florida in these sorts of situations, buyers or sellers on either end of the transaction. If you are suspecting that there's been a problem, definitely give us a call. 813-819-0712 is our office number. And of course, you can call here if you're interested.
Yeah, we'll give it our offer number.
No, I was gonna say you got to say your number twice. Because
Well,
the first time you
text
say
us.
it, the first time you say your number, everyone's like, "Oh, the number," and the second time you say it, they write it down.
It's our number. We give it out so often that people usually text us and we're like, okay, hey, we have this listener. They contacted about this, and we'll get you connected. So the oh shoot, there was something I was going
You
to
had
say.
a bunch of questions. You have all
No,
these
but there was
questions.
something based on what you just said. Oh, the construction defects. Talking about the stucco. Remember how that was a big thing? Yeah. Have you seen that slow down, or is that still a big thing where the stucco defects and like it just crumbles and falls off the exterior? And then maybe Leo can talk about why that even happens.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll definitely give it the primer, and then we'll jump into Leo for the technical side. But stucco is just one of those things that has been a problem in Florida for a lot of years. I mean, it should be lasting much longer than the systems that we're seeing in place. We're seeing in homes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years with significant cracking, stucco sliding off the sides of houses. Penetration is not being done right, water migrating in around windows and all these different areas.
Does that count for that 7 years that you were talking about?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
the clock starts running on our 4-year from when you knew about the problem. So if you had a window leak and you reported it to your builder and said, hey, there's water coming into my house, guess what? You just started your 4-year clock on bringing that in because you have actual knowledge of a problem going on. And then in no case can you bring it longer than 7 years under the new defect bill, which goes into effect April of next year.
2024.
Right. So right now, if your house is less than 10 years old, you can bring claims for those. Starting next April, your house will have to be less than 7 years old to bring those claims.
So built, or like when does that April 2024 clock start? When does it kick in? Just that's the day it changes?
That's the day the savings clause of this law went into effect. So the law went into effect, and then they wrote in there, hey, there's a 1-year window that if you have these older claims, you can bring them in.
Okay.
And then after that point, it's 7 years going forward.
Got it. So it's like a 1-year grandfather period.
Right, because we're removing rights from Florida homeowners, so we want to give people an opportunity that, hey, if you suspect you have a problem, if there's something you have a question about, give us a call, give Leo a call. Let's figure out what's going on with your house, and let's make sure that we can protect your rights and your most important and largest financial asset, your house, from damage.
For sure. Why do we see construction crumbling, cracking, falling off, water intrusion of the windows? Why? Why do we see this?
I mean, back in the day, like 04 to 06, they were building houses as fast as they could, and they just weren't doing what they needed to. Now they don't have the right people to do building. So you have the right material, you just don't have the right labor. They're pulling people from Home Depot, they're pulling people from Lowe's, from the date people, and they're having those people install windows, install stucco. These are arts. These are technical arts. So what's happening is you're just having the wrong people install the product.
Well, if you've got some questions about this or you need an inspection pro to take a look, 813.
377-2775. That's 813-377-2775.
And if you have a construction defect, you can text that same number and we'll get you connected with Dave and Greene. This is Tampa Home Talk. Love where you live or we'll fix it. Welcome home.